a springtime rain to have a friend right in your corner. Your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care. Each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I'm happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And tonight, I've promised you that I would be talking about a new book, which has just been released, is now available here in Buchanan, fourth in a series, Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, this one subtitled For His Grandchildren, that is, for my grandchildren. I follow the tradition of my father, Dr. Harold Almond, who began after my mother died to write about his practice of medicine, and he titled his book simply Stories of a West Virginia Doctor by Harold Almond. And then after he died, I realized there were stories that he had told us around the kitchen table, told us his bedtime stories while making house calls with him, and very, very good stories, some 77 of them that were not in his first book. And so I published a second book. It was called Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2. And that has been very well received. Both of those have become leading sellers for McLean Publishing, who publishes these books. This is out of Parsons, West Virginia, McLean Publishing. And then I was encouraged to write a third book about how we were raised, how my parents raised, and how I had a lifelong desire because of what my father taught me to become a doctor myself. And now, of course, 40 years of practice of medicine, there's many stories to tell. And I told some of those in Stories of a West Virginia Doctor's Son. Now, the fourth volume, of course, is for the grandchildren. We're very blessed to have Eliza, who's about 2.5 years old. We have Harper Rose, who just had her second birthday, and now little Amelia, who is about 6 months old. So we have 3 young granddaughters, and of course, they would be needing to know these stories someday. By talking about this tonight on a TV program, I hope that if you are a father or a brother, a sister, a grandparent, you have stories that you'll begin to write them down, your family history. And you'll do this for the young babies, the children who need to know this, their family heritage. We've let a lot of it get away from us. We used to be great storytellers here in the mountains, and we are, if we will allow ourselves to sit around a campfire where we have reunions, in church services. These little churches, country churches, have a vast history, and often they're family churches. There's many stories within a church community. Many of the little schools, the little 1- and 2-room schools out in the county have been closed. My generation, the generation that graduated in 1966, and so in the 60s, attended those small schools. I've actually been encouraging my class to write stories because those stories, if they're not told, the idea of what is a 1-room school, with all 6 grades or 8 grades in one class, what is that? And that'll get away if we don't tell the stories. Well, let me share with you, rather than go on and on about why to write stories. Let me just share some stories from this book, Stories of a West Virginia Doctor for His Grandchildren. I'll say once again, this is available locally. If you did buy it, for example, $15 from the hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital Auxiliary gift shop, then they get all the proceeds. So this is not necessarily profiting myself. If you buy this from the Historic Society on Main Street, they get all the money, and there'll be a donation to them. If you choose to buy it, Artistry on Main, this is the second generation of our arts co-op on Main Street. Then this will help Artistry on Main. It'll help our community maintain the arts. And it's available in 50 bookstores across America, including the Greenbrier Resort in Tamarack and places. I'm very happy have accepted it because I think they are good stories, and I think others say so too. Well, I'll begin here just by telling a story or two so that you'll know what's in here. I make a long introduction, and I point out that because of the way I was raised, the way many of us have been raised, I'm grounded. I know who I am. For example, I'm my father and mother's son. I'm a member of the Almond family. I'm a West Virginian. I'm an American. I'm a citizen of the world, and I'm a child of God. So you can see the stories will touch many of those things. You who are listening are my sisters, my brothers, my neighbors, my cousins, my friends. And so, you don't stay 64 years in one community without knowing a bunch of people. And some people, and I've said this to certain people, I say, well, you know me better than I know myself. I would say Mr. St. Clair of the Pauline St. Clair Funeral Home would probably know me better than I know myself. He's known me all my life. He's known my family, even before I was born. Calvin Shreve, retired from the old Central Bank, son was in Boy Scouts with me, was a man who knows me better than I know myself. That's a privilege of growing up in a small community. So I tell stories about people like that, things like that. Let me share a story about my parents. Many of you know my father, Dr. Harold Almond, a beloved country physician, now passed away, it's hard to believe, 15 years ago. Practiced for over 50 years and enjoyed his medical practice. In the beginning, he was put through medical school by the Army Air Corps. World War II was a long fought war, and he was in the service for 8 years, including 3 years as he went to Northwestern University Medical School. Then he had an internship at St. Luke's, and then he would join the Air Force, active duty Army Air Corps, and they were at an Air Force base in mother and he in Nebraska, where I was born. And Dad was then assigned overseas in the Pacific, finally making it back to West Virginia after Kay and I were born. This is a story about how they went on their honeymoon and what happened along the Greenbrier River, and ultimately how I got my name, Greenbrier. They were given an opportunity to camp at Thorny Creek by the Leighton Tharp family. Leighton Tharp raised chickens when I was growing up out here on the old Weston Road, and it's now a pawn shop. John Green has a pawn shop in the same building as it used to be a chicken farm, and a very large building, and I remember going in there with massive number of chickens. But he did a number of things. He was a pilot. He helped develop our airport here in the early days, what was called the Lewis Field, and it's about where the new armory is being put in nowadays. And so Leighton Tharp actually had extra rooms in his house. The college at that time, when Dad went to college, didn't have dorms for men, so they would all be out in town someplace. And so Dad stayed with the Tharp family, and so he got to know them well. And so after Mom and he fell in love, and then eventually were married. They were married in Greenbrier County. Granddad was a minister, on my mother's side. And he married them at Raynell, West Virginia, which was the hardwood capital of the world at that time. And they decided to go up to. They were invited by the Tharps to have a honeymoon at their cottage near Cass, West Virginia. So they came up. This is the story about them coming up to the day after the wedding to Cass. They had to buy some supplies, and they met an old character named Greenbrier. And at that time, there were about 4,000 people living in Cass. They were practically all Hungarian. The ones cutting the trees, the red spruce, there were 67,000 acres of red spruce to cut. They were making $1.50 a day. $1.50 a day right here in America. That was a good wage. They had a house to live in. They had to feed their family, clothe their family, everything on that amount of money. And so anyway, Greenbrier, this old character, would sit on the front steps of the general store at Cass, and he would be able to buy penny candy. And of course, the kids loved that. It was a treat they could not afford, the parents could not afford. And he would tell them stories like Little Red Riding Hood, going through the red spruce forest, and the wolf calls. And he was a very dramatic storyteller. And his name was Greenbrier. The Greenbrier River flows right there through that community of Cass. And so Mom and Dad met him, and then were interested in that type of thing. And then later on, when Mom is pregnant with me in Nebraska several years later, they're missing West Virginia at that point, and they began to joke that inside Mom was Greenbrier. And of course, the spirit of West Virginia and wanting to get back to West Virginia. So they named me Greenbrier. So this story is about that. Other things I think are important to remember. I could have not grown up in Buchanan. This story is about the family that bought the tract of timber. I'm looking for their name, but I have it within the story. In any event, the Maurer family, offered Dad a job. They knew that he was studying medicine, that World War II would eventually end, that he would come back to West Virginia. They said, "You can be our company doctor at Cass." And Dad considered it. If he had taken the practice, then he would have his office set up. There was a little hospital. You can still see these buildings in Cass. It's been a state park for 50 years now. 51st year this year. And if you haven't taken that train ride to the top of Bald Knob, it's a good year to do it. And then tour the little town of Cass. But they have a doctor's office and a hospital. And Dad would have been the doctor if he'd chosen to do this. If he for every family, he would get $1 a month to take care of the family, 75 cents to take care of one of the loggers, one of the timbermen, if he was a single man. Then that would have been his salary, and he would be part of that community, and I would have been part of that community, and my life would have been entirely different. Though that's not how it turned out, of course. Mom and Dad came back here to Buchanan, where they had fallen in love at Westland, and I'm very glad, of course, to be in Buchanan. And I think Dad and Mom enjoyed their life very much here. But the story of Thorny Creek is a good story. From a standpoint of learning about our heritage. You learn about how many people from foreign countries make up America. The Hungarian community that cut those 67,000 acres. Now they have dispersed themselves throughout West Virginia, and I was at the VA doing exams yesterday for those men and women who have fought in Afghanistan and Iraq and have been damaged horribly by traumatic brain injury. Had 4 men I examined yesterday. Several of them had Hungarian names, and I was showed an interest in that, and their families came over to cut timber at Cass. Every day that I do an exam, by the way, I find someone has Indian blood in them, and the largest Indian community in the eastern part of America is Barber County. Has more Indians. So interesting things, stories we can tell about West Virginia. Let me tell another story. After I tell a number of stories about my mother and father, I go on to a section about growing up as a boy here. And one of the things that happened to us, and we have to begin someplace in life, my mom and dad came back here and they rented a house down about where the drive-in for the First Community Bank is now, just right below where the Kanoa Theater is, or now it's a Kanoa bar, and so just in that area, right across the street from Domino's Pizza, was an old house, and it was a rental house, and that's where I spent another year or two of my life when I first came to Buchanan, and a couple of things happened there that make an interesting story. 2 parts to it. The house was divided in half, and Dr. Jim Russmeisel was also coming back with his family at that time. So Dad, as a doctor, rented half of the building, and Dr. Jim rented the other half. And we know him over the years as a dear doctor who practiced at the City Hospital, Leonard Memorial Hospital. And he's also passed on, but his family here is still in our community. And so we started off together. I loved apparently to make mud pies. And Mother recalls, told me this story several times growing up, how I nearly drowned in Jawbone Creek. Jawbone Creek is now covered over. Partly right there, it's covered by the bank and their facility. And then further down, Jawbone Creek Park has the creek underneath of it, but it's all covered over. But it was an exposed creek at that time, about 4 foot deep and very muddy. And apparently I slipped and landed on face down in the water, and Mother had to rescue me. And she insists that angels helped her rush down the bank, lifting me up, hitting me hard across the back of my shoulders, which was like how they did artificial respiration at that time. But it worked, of course. I got the mud out of my mouth and water out of my mouth and lungs and started breathing again. And of course, I think that caused my parents to want to move quickly to get away from a creek like that. Also the rats and things like that they recall being there. But another thing happened to me right there on Kanoa Street. Buchanan used to have the main shopping right downtown. So there was Young's Pharmacy, and all the pharmacies were right there. Thompson's Pharmacy, Poundstone Pharmacy, Miller's Pharmacy was Young's Pharmacy at that time. And then they had the Five and Dime, and they had People's Grocery, where everyone would buy their groceries. And anyway, so people would be walking up and down the street in front of our rental house. And I was just learning how to talk. So I would say hello, and I'd say goodbye, and practice my speech. But I knew, and I learned something about behavior at that point that fascinated me. And of course, then I followed that up by being a psychiatrist, studying behavior, working with people about how they behave, why they behave, how to change their behavior, be more fruitful and productive in their life as a doctor, teaching them. A doctor meaning to teach. But I observed this, that if I said to these older women who'd be walking by, "Hi, pretty lady," then they would talk to me. They would engage me. They would be very thrilled to be called pretty lady. And so I don't know how I hit up on that, but Mother said that I really attracted the older women, and they were very pleased to talk to me and tell Mom what a fine young man I was, of course. And that began my interest, really, probably in behavior. Another story. There's many stories. In fact, we have there's 150 pages of stories. Each story is 1 or 2 pages. So I have 70 or so stories. Obviously, not telling them all, but just to wet your whistle, let you know the book's available. Number of places. Start up on the hill at St. Joseph's Hospital at the Auxiliary. It'll be available there. The Historic Society right on Main Street across from the courthouse. Artistry on Main down at the across from the Dairy Queen. It'll be available there. And then you can go online, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, get it directly from McLean Printing, or in 50 other bookstores throughout West Virginia. The Hacker Creek family reunion at a bookstore out at Horner. It's available there, and go on and on. We things have changed. I'm on the school board now, and we hear students who may be doing unsafe things. We have hearings for them if they cross a line with their behavior. And they do something unsafe. There's a special law that we have to follow in West Virginia, and it's a good. And generally, it's outlined well. But one of the things that has changed over the years is that I don't think students would carry knives to school anymore. And if they are, they're very tiny knives, and there's a certain length that's legal, and beyond that, it's not legal. But when I was growing up, things were different. And I want to portray that in a book like this. Generally, we got a knife when we were just young. It would be in our Christmas stocking. My sisters and I all had little pocket knives. These were things we could do for whittling, and we could do a number of things. Well, anyway, Tom Sawyer, a book we used to read a lot, and I encourage children to read it now. We learned there that Tom Sawyer's favorite game was Mumbly Peg. Now, Mumbly Peg is a knife game where you take a knife and you flip it off, say, your wrist, and you try to flip it 3 times and cause it to stick in the earth. Say, that would be a trick you would do. It's Mumbly Peg, and then someone would play horse. They would follow you, see if they can do the same thing. You can take knives and throw it at trees and see if it will stick in the tree. As we saw Davy Crockett doing it when I was growing up, the Disney character, and of course the real character Disney, Davy Crockett was a congressman and a hero of Texas, but there was a knife involved, a Bowie knife, in that movie. So I write a story about Mumbly Peg and how my mother taught me to play Mumbly Peg. Now, she had 4 older half-brothers, and she learned from them, and I have enjoyed it. And then I wonder, at the close of my story, about whether we are going to teach our granddaughters to use knives, and I imagine we will. I point out that my wife cleans fish with a knife. Filipino children learn how to do that, and we want our kids to, of course, enjoy fish, and of course I would say they need to play Mumbly Peg too, a game that I enjoyed playing when I was a child. So I have a number of stories like that. I have a story about exploring. Scouting was very, very important to me, and ventures of childhood. I like this because I found this someplace, but I incorporated it into my story. All the emotions of life can be summed up in ooh, ah, ow, ah, wee. So, all those sounds that kids make when they're having fun. And I write a story about cave exploring. And Skip Fowler was our explorer leader, worked for the gas company in town. Chris, his daughter, is still in town, Chris Buchanan. And so I write about cave exploring, Bowden Cave over on the other side of Elkins, and the fun that we had inside the mountain. Fascinating. Carpe diem, another story, seize the day, is something the soldiers say, and talk about the Golden Farm out at Carter, West Virginia. There were 5 of the Almond children, 5 of the Golden children, and Harley Golden and Adonis Lee Golden, like my parents, were changed by World War II, and so we write a story about visiting their farm and the fun we had with them. These are, again, I'm encouraging you. You may want to read the whole story. Study this, but you'll see if you are listening to this and you understand our heritage here in Central West Virginia and Appalachia, that if we don't write these stories down, this is called memoir writing, then these things will slip away from us. I'm going to be encouraging my sister Beth, who's actually an excellent teacher of writing, to come and do some workshops, and I'll announce them, and we'll announce them throughout the community. She's done this before in several different locations, at the local churches. We did one down at the Market Bistro restaurant, but we'll do some probably at the New Artistry on Main, and have a writing workshop, and encourage those who want to do memoir writing to come and take her class and get started. One of the principles that she has is simply just start writing. Don't think about like how we had to think about things in English class, about proper grammar and getting spelling right and all of that. That can come later, and we can work up the stories, but the idea is just to get your story down. Some people, again, are not ready to write their story. Maybe they need to tell it. I know the children have, Maria and Ronce have bought their mother, Rasely, a tape recorder, and it's easier for her to tell her story, and then just to record it. And we can take the dictation and write the story later. But the important thing is to get the stories down, because if these are not told, they'll slip away. And I'll give you an example. I'm sorry this happened without me getting the story down, but several years back I became aware that the French Creek United Methodist Church used to be on Main Street, used to be where the City Hall is now. And so the congregation was outgrowing that, and they moved up the street to build what is now the First United Methodist Church, which now still stands and is a wonderful community church. But the building was okay. It was a good building. This is the turn of the last century. They decided not to destroy it. They decided to move it by horse and buggy. And they moved it up the main street and cleared the French Creek. And there it is. It sits there today, and it has additions been built onto it. But you can go inside. They have recently remodeled it, and I went up there for a wonderful sing last Sunday, and once again was impressed at what a fine building it is, historic building for our community. And then I regretted that the Kane family, who actually knew the stories better than anyone else in that congregation, have now passed away. And as far as I know, the stories were not written down, which is too bad. But that's gives you one example that I discovered here just on Mother's Day. The reason that we want to do memoir writing and write some of these stories down. But let me share yet one more story, and then we'll close for today. And by the way, I want to share that there's art in each of these sections. I have a cousin, Kiara Woods. She's just in the 4th grade. She'll be through the 4th grade here shortly. But here's a hypodermic needle. She's drawing about medicine. And art and the science is this section. And I've asked her to illustrate each section, and she's done a wonderful job. And this time she draws a needle. And I tell her, I said, well, it's a little pretty dull needle, but you get the idea. Doctors, of course, give shots, and that's she's focused in on that. But one of the stories would be about snake handling, and this is just to wet your whistle. I have a number of stories about medicine. Dad and Mom were aware that there was a snake handling church near Get Out, near where the Little Canoa River flows, and we had a conversation about that. Dr. Haima, chemistry professor at Wesleyan, and Dad sitting around having a conversation at the Sunday dinner table. And I think my sisters did not go into medicine because we had a number of these stories about things like rattlesnakes and poison and medicine at our meals. But it was fascinating to me. And so I've written this up, and Dad talks about the emergency room, the snake bites that he handled over the years. And I've had my share now in the past 40 years of medicine. Dr. Haima surmises in some cases that the rattlesnakes that the snake handlers were using they had dry and wet bites, and sometimes they would be warning and not poisoning. If they were eating, they would poison, and then the poison would actually digest the meat of the animal, and it would be helping the snake later to eat it as food. So fascinating story on snake handling. Many other things we could talk about. I hope that you are interested, not only the latest volume, but there are now 4 books, Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, all similar stories of our local community. A special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week, talk about issues of tender loving care and the practice of medicine here in these hills. We look forward to seeing you again next week, probably telling more stories at that time. We'll see you then.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care, Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buchanan for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.